There's a number going around right now, bouncing from social media post to podcast title to blog revelation like it's an Epstein list leak. If 3.5% of the population participates in a protest movement, the regime will fall. It's everywhere. People talk about it like it's some sort of political law of gravity. Like if you hit the number, change becomes inevitable. It just happens. The system cracks. Abuse of authority stops. It's a magical elixir. It won't, because that's not how power works. It's certainly not how this regime works. And it's not how resistance works. And that's not what the original research claimed either. Erica Chenoweth and Mariah Stephan did rigorous work. They tracked hundreds of mass movements in the 20th and early 21st centuries and found that nonviolent campaigns with 3.5% active participation were more likely to succeed, depending upon how you define success. That's historically, that's retrospectively. They didn't say that number causes success. And to their credit, they have gone out of their way to correct people who treat it like it's a cheat code and to caution against overreading any success of nonviolent opposition. Nonviolent opposition has real limits. But that's what it's become. It's become this kind of leftish talisman. Yet another shortcut, another way to avoid the actual work and the actual cost of resistance. Hey folks, I'm Tad Sturmer. I'm a scholar of resistance at the University of Southern Denmark and the author of the forthcoming A Resistance History of the United States, coming at you next year from Steerforth Press. I study resistance, not protest. I look at the moments in history when people directly confronted abuse of authority, when they acted not because it was safe, not because they were guaranteed success, but because they refused to be complicit any longer in the abuse of authority. They didn't wait for legitimacy. They didn't appeal to the system for recognition. They forced a response because allowing the abuse to continue was not an option. They took risk. They endured failure. And most of the time, the power they resisted survived. Most of the time, they failed. So it's not a study for the faint of heart. It is a depressing study in many ways. But we don't find the lessons in just what worked. We find them in what was required. That is looking at 16 different case studies of resistance moments across 350 years of United States history and 21 moments from around the globe in the 20th and 21st centuries. And that's what the 3.5% crowd misses. They're not looking for resistance. They're looking for an easy, non-risky reset button. The key point is that mass mobilization in and of itself isn't enough and never has been. That 3.5% threshold has been met many times, and it didn't matter. Let's take a look at Prague 1968. 1968, that year alone, a case study for this kind of thing. The population mobilized, especially students. Protests spread across the country, something like 500,000 Czechs. The state, as reformist as it was already, fractured until Moscow rolled in and shut it down. The numbers were there, and it wasn't enough. Why? Because who else was there? The Warsaw Pact. Ireland 1916. We need to take a closer look at Irish resistance. The Easter Rising was decisive. It is an incredibly important moment, but it didn't collapse British rule. What shifted Ireland was the backlash, the executions, the overreach, the increased exposure of British imperial brutality. That catalyzed mass support, that prompted organized opposition, and that led to organized resistance. But even then, the Free State was years away. The Rising itself, not enough. And the George Floyd protests a couple of years ago, 20 million people took to the streets. That's not an estimate. That's documented participation, more than 6% of the US population. What followed? Corporate statements, fleeting reforms, and a coordinated backlash. The system adapted. It didn't fall. Defund what? And no kings, give me a break. But I do get lots of emails asking me for money. So what exactly is the 3.5% supposed to mean? Resistance that matters doesn't look like a crowd. It looks like pressure. Not a spectacle, but a structural threat. It's the moment when power starts to lose control, when it has to recalibrate or recalculate, not because of how many people oppose it, but because it can't maintain obedience. It can't retain function. It can't adapt fast enough. Denmark, 1943. The Nazi regime wasn't disrupted by protest. It was non-cooperation, labor strikes, sabotage, refusal to enforce anti-Jewish policies. The resistance made the occupation harder to maintain. A place that the Nazis thought was safe, was their model protectorate, turned into one of their worst nightmares. Black loyalists during the American Revolution, they didn't appeal for inclusion into the Patriots' mindset. They defected. They walked away from Patriot control and forced the British to choose between policy and principle. That act of resistance broke the Patriots' illusion of stability. Kansas Free Staters. They didn't hold rallies. They built governments, courts, militias, newspapers. That wasn't a protest movement. That was a parallel power established in defiance of federal authority. And now, look at the people putting themselves between the modern Gestapo and their targets, making them move hotels, quit their jobs, be miserable every day when they go on assignment to kidnap people for the state. Digital harassment, doxing. ICE has to recalibrate, reconsider, understand that there's a price to pay for abusing authority, for hurting people, that masks can't hide everything. Now, that's not violent, but it also ain't peaceful. That's what we call disobedience. Thorough would be thrilled. Your job is to take people. You might have to lose a little part of yourself, your peace. Wake up with that every morning, ICE. You multiply that energy by 1,000, with all of the personal risk, all the arrests, all the dangers that the resistors are risking, then you've got something. In every one of those cases, it wasn't mass participation that mattered. It was what the participation did, the pressure it imposed, the systems it broke, it stressed, and the alternatives it created. The way the 3.5% myth gets used now is part of a bigger failure, what we might call the TED Talk or ChatGPT strategy. Surface level insight, stripped of analysis, risk, consequence, reality. It looks like a lesson. It's familiar, but it ain't. Just like a TED Talk, right? It packages discomfort into something digestible, a takeaway, something you can quote without having to do anything. And just like ChatGPT, it mimics structure, but it doesn't interrogate meaning. It connects dots, but it doesn't act if they're the right ones. They just look right. And that's what the liberal imagination keeps doing. That's what the leftist and kind of what passes in America for the left keeps doing. First it was, the Constitution will save us. Then the courts will stop this. Then Congress might impeach him again. Or Jamie Raskin's subpoenas, or Hakeem Jeffries' baseball bat, or a Cory Booker speech, or maybe just walk out of a committee vote. That'll get him. Too bad about PBS. Let's push send on a tweet. And now it's, we just need to get enough people in the streets. 3.5%, let's hit it. And it's all the same delusion, that there's a fix out there that doesn't require sacrifice. That if we hit the right number, or file the right lawsuit, or hold the right march, the system will self-correct. That there will be some sort of restoration. But it won't, because the system, the American system, is already doing exactly what it was designed to do over 200 years. Protect power, absorb pressure, and wait you out. Steve Bannon knows that. Stephen Miller knows that. You need to know it too. Resistance isn't a percentage. It is a line you cross. The 3.5% figure is descriptive, that's all. And when you weaponize it as strategy, you erase what resistance really demands. The movements that matter don't succeed because they're big. They succeed because they're committed. They succeed because they're willing to keep going after the spectacle fades and after authority hits back. Resistance confronts, whether people are watching or not. It doesn't perform. It disrupts. It outlasts. So stop quoting 3.5%. Stop pretending mass is enough. Start asking what you're willing to risk, because that's where resistance begins. And it is the only thing that has ever worked.